let's start with some introductions first. I'm Sophie. I'm the performance marketing lead here at Supermetrics. I've worked with performance marketing for over 10 years now, and I've learned that a spreadsheet is a performance marketer's best friend when you have several campaigns running across a lot of different ad platforms, and you need to keep track of all the spends and everything. And I also have a deep dislike for copy pasting, so building automated spreadsheets has become a bit of a passion of mine. Rachel, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Rachel Marsland. I'm a customer success manager based in Toronto, Canada. And I've been with Supermetrics for just over a year now, but I've been a CSM for much longer. So although I don't use sheets in my day-to-day to perform my role, it is something that I help my customers through and guide them through the use of sheets in our other products and make it easier. So I'm looking forward to share some tips that I feel are most helpful for my customers as well. Okay, so just for all of you who might not be totally familiar with Supermetrics, you're going to be by the end, but Supermetrics in a nutshell, we basically move data from popular marketing and sales sources into any reporting analytics tool. So today we're focusing on Google Sheets, but we do offer products for Excel, Looker Studio, as well as data warehousing. And you can see some of the examples of connectors that we offer on the left-hand side here, but we have I think we have over 100. So there's a lot more that we have that aren't in this. And you can check out our website definitely to learn a bit more about everything that we can do.
Great. So we'll first start off with some tips for Google Sheets. And our first tip of the day will be how to insert image creatives into Google Sheets. So this is a really neat little trick when you're doing something like a creative analysis, and if you pull reports from social media, whether it be ad platforms or the organic part of social media, you might just get the creatives as a URL. And if you look at the image I have here, it's not very, the URL might not be very descriptive. Even if you get the ad image, it might not still really be very descriptive. So this is a really neat little trick you can do to make your ad creative images or creative reporting much more effective and stunning looking. And by the way, when you do this and you pull in the images, they might be tiny. So just know that by adjusting height and width of the cell where the image is located, you can increase or decrease the size of the image. But I'll show you a demo of how this is done. So I pulled a bit of data via Supermetrics for Nike's Instagram account, and I took the URL of the creative, the caption, and like per post. And then, but as we can see, it's not very visually easy to remember what creative that actually is or get a feel for what the image is. So by writing image and using the image formula and taking that URL into the cell, we can get that image. And then by just copying that to all the other rows we have images in, we can actually get the images and have a much more nice and easy time analyzing our creatives. So this has been a really good trick that a lot of people here at Supermetrics has been really excited about as well. Then moving on to tip number 2, dates and time zones in Google Sheet. So we have, when we're doing something like budget pacing or goal pacing, we want to know, are we spending over our monthly budget? Are we going to reach our monthly goals? We probably need to use some kind of date formulas. So I'll show you a few formulas in a moment in a demo, but being able to automatically pull in what date today is and what end of how many days there are in the month will really help you automate those calculations and stay on top of how you're doing comparison to your goals or your budget. And on the time zones, just know that if something's looking a bit off when you pull in dates or times, Google Sheets in itself has a time zone setting that you can go in and tweak from the settings part of Google Sheets. And when you're working with Supermetrics, there might be There's several different ways the tool brings in data. So it's a bit depending on what data source you're using, but it might be that the data is either coming in with a time zone specified by yourself in that platform, or that the data provider has set hard-coded, or then it actually is responding to the Google Sheets time zones as well. But let's get into the demo. So here, first going to show you how you pull today's date, which is a great way to always keep your data up to date. So it's the simplest formula. You just write equals and today with empty parentheses, and it will show you today's data. Or today's date, sorry. Then once we have this, we can calculate a lot of other metrics for instance, for this month. So if we want to know what the last day of how many days there are in May, we might want to know the last of this month date. So then we're going to use the end of month formula. So we write EO month. And then we select the start date, which in this case will be today's date when we're trying to figure out this month. And then we just put a comma and write 0 because it's this month. So we don't need to adjust with either pluses or minuses, and close it. And then ta-da, we have the first of the month. Then to do a lot of other calculations, we might need to know the last day of last month. And that's completely the same formula, except we put in -1 here instead of 0. So now that we have these 3 dates, we can, for instance, calculate total days in the month, which we'll need to split our budget by day. So we write days and we put the end date, which is the last of this month, of course. And we put in the last of last month, which as the start date. And then we get the correct amount of days, which is 31. Then if we want to know how many days there are still left in this month, we basically do the same thing, but instead of putting in first and last, or last days of this and last month, we put in last of this month, and the start date is today. So then we get how many full days there's still left in this month, which yesterday was 23, sorry. And then if we want to figure out how many days already passed this month, we put in last month's, or we put in today, and we put in the last of last month. So now that we have all these numbers, we can, for instance, calculate percentage-wise how much of the month has already passed. And how much of the month is already left with a similar division calculation. And then we can use these to compare to the budget and or the goal that we've been setting. So really, really neat building blocks to build out budget pacing, for instance. Then moving on to our third tip, which is using a split function to manipulate and clean up data. So sometimes when we pull data from web analytics, ad platforms, any kind of data platform we have, it might be that the data is either in the wrong format that we're looking to get it, or it's maybe a bit messy. There might be some additional like parameters in a URL if we're pulling from Google Analytics, or we want to do some analysis from, like, for instance, a list of emails, and we want to split the emails into names and domain and the domain part, or if we have a date and we want to split that into separate, the year, month and day into separate columns for some analysis, we can do this with a split formula. So what we're going to do is I've actually pulled here some Google Analytics data, but unfortunately the Google Analytics profile it's pulled from wasn't very well set up and maintained. So it has been pulling in a lot of parameters, meaning that the data that's being presented is actually like split over several rows. So it's not actually giving the right amount of sessions per page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a bit of the data. So you can see that the same page path shows up, but then there's this question mark, and after that of whole lot of parameters, and we want to clean that up. So we just write split, and then we want to refer to the text that we want to split, which is in this case the page path. And then we just need to tell it where to split, and that we put into quotation marks. So that's at the question mark for this case. And then we just close it, and we now get the page path without the parameter. And again, we can just stretch it out to cover all the rows of the data. And now we have the the page paths without the parameters. But since this in itself doesn't, for instance, in this example, doesn't really show us all the, doesn't really give us the full analysis yet. The next way to actually continue this analysis would be to use pivot tables. And pivot tables are a great way when you have a huge data mass or a lot of rows, like hundreds and thousands of rows, to actually summarize or calculate averages for certain dimensions you have in this data. So for instance, let's say you have a list of ad spend by date. You could use a pivot table to calculate total ad spend by month or year, or as we're going to see, once you split to clean up your data, you can and have created a new dimension. You can use pivot tables to summarize your data. And if you have if you're an e-commerce store and you have a huge amount of product data, for instance, you could calculate sum for which product color or size or something like that is calculate averages and sums for those type of dimensions. Or if you have a huge data set of campaigns and ads, and you can also summarize by ad name or something like that. So I'm going to show you now how you find and use pivot tables. So we're going to continue with the same data set we had already, but we go to the insert menu in Google Sheets. We select pivot tables. And then as long as we've selected a cell within that data range, it will pick the correct data range for us. And then we just need to decide where we insert it. So for this, I'm going to insert it into existing sheet, pick just a cell where I want to put it, and then I'm going to create it. And now it will open the pivot table editor for us on the right-hand side. And from here, it's just a matter of dragging and dropping the correct dimensions to rows or columns, and then the right values or metrics to the value column. And then now we have it summarized the page path, and then to make it even more readable, we're gonna sort it by sum of sessions and descending order. So now we see what is our most popular page path without any additional parameters. So this is one use case for pivot tables that is really, in my opinion, helpful and useful to know about. Then I'm going to hand it over to Rachel for some tips for how to use Supermetrics for Google Sheets.
Yeah, so thank you, Sophie. That was great. So we're going to start with some tips specifically towards Supermetrics in Google Sheets. And at the very beginning, I've actually included a video that just goes over the basics of getting started with Supermetrics and opening that in Google Sheets itself. So that will play just for about a minute.
First, you'll need to install Supermetrics Google Sheets add-on from Google Workplace Marketplace. You can find it by clicking Extensions, Add-ons, Get Add-ons, or simply by entering the search term Supermetrics, and then finding the add-on product page. You can then install the add-on and start using it. Once it is installed, you'll see Supermetrics listed under the Extensions tab, from which you can then launch the main interface with the Launch sidebar button.
So now that you know how to install and get started with Supermetrics right in Google Sheets, I'll get into the tips. So our first tip is how to keep your reports running smoothly with longer time frames. Okay, so your reports will run more efficiently using longer time frames because it actually reduces the chance of your data timing out and also allows you to combine new results with old. So this is really ideal for when you're doing repetitive performance analysis. So if you're pulling the same query and having that refresh daily or monthly, and you don't want to lose your previous data, but you still want to have that all included in the same chart, you can use that through using the combine new results with old. And I'll show you the specifics on how to access these options in the video next. And then, as I mentioned, it also helps with avoiding losing your data. So we have this little checkbox here that's the keep previous results on refresh error, and that helps for some of your longer time frame queries. If they do time out or run back any errors for any reason, it won't actually overwrite the data that you've already pulled. So if you're pulling a reoccurring query, it's not going to have you lose anything until that is able to update properly. So that is the information, and here's just a quick demo of how you can access those features. Okay, so here's the Supermetrics sidebar. We're going to go in and just set up a basic query to get us started. So I chose Facebook ads, which I've already had authenticated. And then we're just going to put in some basic dates. We'll pull for the last 12 months, and then we can choose our metrics. So for our metrics and dimensions, we offer like hundreds of these, and they're specific to each data source, which can also be found on our website, the full list of everything we offer, but there's tons. So we won't show them all today, but just to give a general idea of how we would pull this report typically. This is how we would pull our report, and then we'll give that just a few seconds to run the query. It's usually pretty quick, and I would say that it's very user-friendly, although I'm slightly biased. Okay, so now we see that our query has pulled, and we can go in and edit the query. And this is where we're actually going to use those options that I was just talking about. So if you go down into your options here, you can actually see combine new results with old and keep previous results on refresh error. So if we toggle those two off, then we can apply our changes. If we come back in another day and refresh those queries, or if we set up a transfer schedule where those will continue to refresh. So here we can set up a transfer schedule by adding a trigger and choose when we want those features to be available. Then all of the data that was currently here will stay, as well as the new data that's been added. And this is also great just for updating any of your queries. It was so good, it wants to play it twice. Okay, so now we're on tip number 6, how to easily spot increases or decreases using color scales. So the reason that we recommend using color scales is that it can easily help you spot highs and lows. It improves the appearance, makes it easier to read, allows you to focus on the key metrics that are most important. So then you can kind of make the not so nice metrics a little bit invisible by not highlighting them. And it's also great for ad hoc reporting. If you're quickly pulling a report and you just want to know those numbers and point out those key metrics, then I definitely recommend using the color scales. And I am aware that this is a feature that is available in Google Sheets as well, but it's just a lot easier and more efficient to use it through the Supermetrics sidebar, as it'll pertain to all of your data and you can just pull it really quickly with your queries. So I'll show you how to do that now. Okay, so now we have a sample query like we did before, but what we're going to do is into that same option section, we'll scroll down to where it says highest values with colors. So when we clicked on that, the option that was selected in this case is just to show the color scale that's available through there. Okay, perfect. So now we can see it will actually color our data to however we wanted that to display. There are a few options for how you can actually show this scale. So as you can see, there's quite a few options. You can do just the highest with green or do a full-on scale that shows all the different variety. But this is just another great tool, as I said, especially for just pointing out those key metrics and when you have a large data set. Okay, so tip number 7, how to use and create templates. I'll say this is probably my favorite tip that I say, and I always tell it to my new customers to get familiar with our templates. So we have a bunch of templates and we have them categorized by our products as well as the product area. So you can do it based off of paid social or SEO and so forth and so on. And then we also do it specific to each connector. So we have ones that are just for Facebook and like that. I think that I recommend using our templates because they're helpful when you're getting started. When you pull in to use a template, it actually pulls in those queries as well. So you can have your first reports generated within minutes or seconds of starting to use Supermetrics. And it also helps for simple branding for any agency clients or brands. If you want to color code and make things a standard format, it makes it easier for when you're pulling the reports for all your other customers. And then I just recommend using our templates for inspiration as well, because it can help you see what is possible to display just in Sheets without necessarily using Looker Studio to make the displays a little bit more visual. You can find all of our templates at supermetrics.com/template gallery or just templates, and that will give you the full variety of what we have. Okay, so this is what will come up on the website if you look that up, and you can see here that we do have our templates for all of our different sources that we offer, but I'm actually just gonna go ahead and filter it so that we can see just the ones that are specific to Google Sheets. And again, you can see there's like a big list here. We have quite a few that we offer. In fact, we have several pages of templates that we offer. And I'm going to dive into the Google Ads for today, but we'll click on that. And then this is what will pop up. It just kind of gives you an overview so you can look at each of the templates a little bit more in depth and see if this is the right one for you. And you'll also notice that a lot of our templates have several pages of metrics and information visualized there, as well as a raw data tab a lot of the time. But in the top corner, I'll just click to use this template, and that will go ahead and populate in Google Sheets for me. So now I can just go ahead and give the authentication as if I was getting started with Supermetrics. I'll give it the permissions that are needed. And choose the accounts that I want to pull. It's a lot of loading, but I wanted to leave it in real time to show you guys that it is actually really quick, but I feel like no amount of time watching a loading screen, it feels longer. But here we go. So now we've actually given those permissions, and in just a second, we'll see our queries populate on the side. Okay, so we can see here that it's automatically pulled each of the queries for us to fill out the template with the information that we want to have included, but we can also go back and change those and edit any parts of these templates that we want to. So this is just general on how to use a Supermetrics template, but I also really wanted to just show you guys how to make your own template and how to import those. So in this example, I'm going to go to the template gallery that's available in the Supermetrics sidebar. And scroll all the way down to the bottom. And that's where it actually allows us to put in our own custom templates from a URL. Now, what I did for mine, so I can just populate it quickly, was I actually made a Supermetrics template, like took a Supermetrics template, edited it to be for my favorite sports team, and just made a really rough demo version of what my template would look like, and then saved that as my own template to use in Supermetrics. So now, whenever I want to create a new report for a new customer or for a new area and want to use the same template that I started with, I can actually just go in and add the template like we just did through the sidebar in the Supermetrics. launching, and then that'll just take a moment to refresh. And again, it will add those queries in so that we can still get that data showing. And for the templates, you can really have like as much freedom as you want in terms of applying your own filters and just in terms of any sort of visual aspects that you want to include, you have complete freedom there. So I do recommend checking them out, even if you think you know what you want. Sometimes it can be a lot. It can be very helpful. So there we have it. We have our template sourced with all the data that we wanted it to pull, and can use that anytime. Okay, so tip number 8, how to use filters to focus on what's important. Ooh. Okay, so perfect. So filters are great for just removing clutter from your data sets. And as I mentioned, it helps you focus on what you need. It can also help you to narrow scope in large queries. So if you're running a huge data set, but you want to focus in on something smaller, I highly recommend using the filters as just an easy way to limit that. Rather than having to search through it yourself or use your own like finder's key in Google Sheets. And then we also have the ability to stack filter options, which I think is pretty cool. So in the example, I'll show you how we can do the and or options. But again, the fields available for filtering are endless. There's tons. So it can be really handy just for diving through your data a little quicker. Okay, so again, we're in the Supermetrics sidebar and we're working with an existing query. You can also set up filters from the jump when you run a new query. But let's say we showed here, we're pulling 24 months of data and it's a lot. We have over 100 rows. Sorry. Pickle. Sorry about that. We have over 100 rows of data. So we're actually going to apply some filters to lower the sound and make it more accurate to what we want to see. So as you can see, there's tons of options, but I'm going to pull by campaign name and have it to be contained. So you can use all filtering options here. It can be contains, does not contains, is less than, equal to, higher than. All the options will show up there. And I'm actually going to pull in any of our campaign names that include enterprise. Perfect. So you can see we've already limited our list down to 35 rows, and that's a lot better already, but I want to get a little bit more specific. So we can add in another filter. And this is where we have the options to do and or. So in this instance, we'll just show you how to do or. I want it to include campaign names that include enterprise, or let's do like DWH, or you can do any of the keywords that you want to search. You have tons of options for how you want to filter. And now we'll apply those changes. And for this example, I did it one filter at a time, but you can certainly add multiple filters at one time and just apply all the changes together. It's just nice to see the list get smaller and smaller. And now we'll add one more field in, and perfect. So in this meeting, in this webinar, we definitely didn't dive into all of the different options and filters that are available, but there's tons of them. Just kind of give you a high level look at the best ones to use. But I definitely recommend playing around because there's so many options that you can do too in Supermetrics, just in that little sidebar.
Thanks, Rachel. And now I'm going to talk a bit about combining data from multiple sources to create an overall performance report. And this will combine a bit of Supermetrics tips with some general Google Sheets tips. So one main feature that we're going to cover in this tip will be VLOOKUP, vertical lookup. I think it's a formula that all marketers should know and use, because it's a really neat way and a robust way to combine two or several data sets together and keep them keep it so that they are combined in a correct way, and you don't make any false analysis based on data that's not synced up. So, and I'm also going to show a few other tips in this demo, but why would we like to combine several data sets? Well, of course, if you're running, for instance, campaigns in several data sources, you have your Facebook campaigns and your Google campaigns and your LinkedIn campaigns and TikTok campaigns. You might want to have, for instance, one sheet that tracks all of your spend across all of them and shows you what the total spend for your day, the year, the month, and so on is. And that's one reason to bring in the data together. And it can also be like specific campaigns or overall ad or campaign or overall ad performance. So for vertical lookup, it's a bit more of a trickier formula to use than the ones I showed earlier, but in the end, it's fairly simple as well. So I highly recommend to you guys to test it. And one thing to note is that it looks up data vertically. So having data sorted as columns is one of the prerequisites for it to work. So let's jump into the demo. And I've already here pulled a bit of cost data from both Facebook ads and from Google ads. Both are in the same format, so they are by day and cost in USDs for the full year. And the data sets otherwise look identical, but they are pulled with Supermetrics from Google and from Facebook. And firstly, we'll need also a date column to pull total daily ad spend together. So I'll create that by first using, again, the today formula here, just to pull today's date. And then below that, I'll just put in a formula that takes the day above and minuses by 1. So there we have yesterday. And then stretching that out, we'll have a list of data or dates by declining in declining order. And once we have a date, we have something that all the data sets have, every one of them have date. So then we can use VLOOKUP and use that that date as a joint metric to pull everything together. So for VLOOKUP, we write again VLOOKUP. And then the search key is the joint data. So that's the date in this case. And we select that. Then we need our range, which is where we're going to ask it to look for the data from, which is in this case, the Facebook ads cost data, both column A and column B. Then we want it to return the second column B, which is the cost. So we just write number 2. And then the last question is, do you want an approximate or exact value? And we write false since we want the exact value. And then we just copy that to all the different all the other rows, and we do the same for Google, which we do exactly the same. We will want it to find the date, and the range is the only thing that differs. We want the Google range this time, but again, the cost is in the second column, so we write number 2. It's again, we want the exact, so we write false here, and then we have the Google ad spend, and now we know that it's pulled by date, so it matches up the Facebook and Google. So we can then just use a basic sum formula to add those two together and get total ad spend by day. And then once we have this and the date formula is dynamic, we can set a scheduled refresh as Rachel already showed from Supermetrics, and we can have it refresh daily. I think I'm going to set it here for every morning in my time zone. But of course, you could have any of the options monthly, weekly, and I'm going to put it to start at 8 a.m. So I'll have it once I arrive at work, the schedule or the refresh will have happened. And if I want, I can send an email to myself if something fails, but I'm just going to set it like this. And then now I have a fully automated ad spend by day report. And then if I layer on here something like using those date formulas to calculate how much there is of the date left, and I bring in what our ad budget is and split that by date, I can start calculating, am I overpacing, underpacing? For instance, if we're now at 25% of the month, but I've already, according to the budget calculations, spent 30% of the budget, maybe I need to go into my campaigns and adjust them. Similarly, if it's 25% of the month has already gone, but I'm already only pacing at 10% of the monthly goal for conversions, I might want to start doing something to try to reach that monthly goal. So layering on, and here you could also, for instance, use the split function to then, once you have the daily data, you could split the date into year, month, and day, and then pivot to get your monthly and yearly ad spends as well. So once you have that, those two queries from Supermetrics and a bit of Google Sheets magic, you can really create like a fully automated spend report, for instance.
And back to me again. Okay, so our last tip is shared connections. For this tip, I would say it's a general efficiency tip. It's not specific to necessarily pulling in one specific query or doing one specific task. It's more so just a way to use Supermetrics really effectively to save your time. So also allows you to share your logins and access only in Supermetrics. So the concept is that you can go ahead and share login and share authentication with your team members through the source for anybody that's been added. So they don't actually get your login information. It just allows you to allow them to use that login for accessing any queries. So for example, when we clicked in and authenticated, we can share that. You can also manage your connections at hub.supermetrics.com. We used to call this our team site, but now it's the hub, and it just allows you to manage any of your data sources and see where your team members are. So now I'm just going to show you kind of the basics on how to do that. Okay, so we're in the Supermetrics sidebar to create a new query, and we can see all of the data sources that are currently in use. So these are all the data sources that I've used before and I've authenticated previously. We'll click into Google Ads for this one, and I apologize if it's a bit blurry. We'll go ahead and share this connection with our team, which would allow anybody that I've added into my team as a user or above in permissions to be able to run queries off of this connection. Go ahead and allow those permissions. Give that a moment. Okay, so now it's updated. And so everybody should be able to access this and use this data source connection to run their queries. But let's just double check this and make sure that it did actually load the way that we want it to. So we'll go back into the data source tab here, and we're going to go in the top corner where it says manage, and that will bring us to the hub.supermetrics URL that I gave you. And we can see all of our connected data sources and the data sources that we haven't connected yet. This also gives us the opportunity to connect to any new ones if we want to, or just manage those connections in general. You can filter by the shared versus private connections. So you can see really easily if there's something that you really don't want to have shared, then you can quickly change that and it will remove that access immediately and fail all queries for anybody who was relying on that access. But let's just take a look. So we can see here that I have one team member with a private connection that isn't shared with me, but my connection did in fact share with my team. So I'm able to see that and manage that here. And it's just with the click of a button, it's really easy. So I can click on that and choose to make this connection private. This kind of just gives you everything that you need to know about, like your queries will fail if you make this connection private. So make sure that you don't have any other people on your team relying on that. But I highly recommend using shared connections, especially when you're adding on new team members and things like that.
Yes, so that was the 10 tips we had to share with you guys today. I hope you got some insight into how beneficial using Supermetrics for Google Sheets can be. And if you really want to get your hands dirty, we offer a free 14-day trial that covers the full sidebar and all the data sources. So just go in to supermetrics.com, click start a trial, and get started from there and create your own automated reports.